What's up, y'all? Today we're sharing on what it was like to be a digital nomad in Cuenca, Ecuador. We've been here for the last month and it's been absolutely incredible. There has been zero complaints, but we'll be walking through what it's like and what it has taken for us to be digital nomads. We'll be talking about things like how we found our Airbnb, Wi-Fi, working spaces, digital nomad community, expat community, etc.
COVID, safety, all that jazz. We just want to encapsulate what it's like so that you can decide if it would be a good fit for your digital nomad next stop. So first we're going to talk about where we stayed. We stayed in El Centro of Cuenca, and it was on Calle Larga, which is the main street, super close to all the restaurants and everything. We would definitely recommend. There's also a Selena right down the street.
Selenas are known for digital nomad communities. They're hostels that are also co-working spaces.
Yep, and we will link the Airbnb in the description below, but our hosts were incredible, best hosts that we've ever encountered.
Jack and Michelle.
Yep, thank you. They were so awesome, and they were able to answer any questions that we had, helped us get COVID tests before flying back, all that jazz. Amazing hosts. And the apartment literally looked exactly like the pictures, and it was even a little bit bigger than we thought it would be, but it was a 2-bed, 2-bath with modern amenities, very secure, and it cost us a total of $1,100 for the entire month. That was all fees included, and this is a little bit higher price for Cuenca, but we wanted to make sure we had enough space, and we'd both be working from home, and we take a lot of calls, so we needed to be in different spaces, otherwise it would have just been chaos. So that's what worked best for us. But if you wanted to look into find cheaper housing, you can find some longer term listings on some of the Facebook groups for about $300 to $600 a month.
Those are for longer term stays. So if you're looking for a 6-month stay or a year lease, then you can get those kind of deals that are $300 to $600 a month that are fully furnished and in great areas, great apartments. But if you go through Airbnb, there's going to be that higher fee, especially if you're doing short stays, which Airbnbs are better at hosting for shorter stays. Some other great places to look are Facebook communities. If you Google Cuenca, Ecuador expat community, there's also a ton on Facebook, but there's also a ton just on the web. They have their own newspaper and blog that they post to weekly. I actually found some listings of lovely different apartments on their forums, and so check those out as well.
Entering and exiting Ecuador, what are the requirements? And definitely check with airlines and check the embassy pages because these change all the time. But for us, when we went into Ecuador, since we're fully vaccinated, we did not have to provide a PCR test. And then on the way back, going back into the US, we still had to provide a PCR test within 72 hours of our flight. And we can link where we got that. It was $42 per person, and our Airbnb hosts let us know where we should go in town to get that. Work-related topics such as Wi-Fi, getting a phone or a SIM card while you're in Cuenca. For us, one thing to note and a reason why we chose Cuenca, Ecuador, was that we'll be on Central Time, which is really easy for both of us. Chris works East Coast time, I work Pacific time, so it was right in the middle, and definitely favorable for US workers. Another thing to note is Wi-Fi. The Airbnb that we were at was on single line fiber, and it was 24 megabits download speed, I believe, and it worked good enough. It was adequate for us. We were both on Zoom meetings pretty much all day, so there's a lot going on. And there are 2 co-working spaces right by El Centro. One is Selena that we just touched about, where there's a digital nomad community. It's a hostel, different living situations, but they also have co-working. And then there is a place called Impacto, and I believe the cost for those was about $80 to $100 per month, but definitely check it out. We didn't need it since our apartment had Wi-Fi that was sufficient for us, but there's definitely options if you need them.
There's phone plans. So when we came down from the United States, they didn't have Verizon down here. And so I had to get a new phone plan. And so I went to a local store. I think there's a couple carriers called Claro and Movistar. And it would cost between $5 and $20 a month, depending on how much internet or calls you're making. But I think I paid $17, got 15 gigs of internet and unlimited calling, which is fantastic and cheaper than what I would pay in the United States. But they can go all the way down to like $5, where you're getting, a good like 2 or 3 gigs of internet and a couple hours of calling. You'll see a ton of different signs that have like Claro or Movistar, and so you just walk in there, ask them for a SIM card. I think they call them cheap in Spanish.
Cheap, yeah.
So you look for a cheap, and they'll tell you where to get one and sell you one, etc., and help you set it up. You'll have to have some sort of identification with you. And final note, Mattea used her American plan from AT&T, and she paid what?
I think
how
it
much
was
a month?
$70 for the month, but it just was easier for me to not. I didn't want to deal with getting a SIM card and all that, and just keep my phone number. So.
All right, so food and drink. There's tons of food and drink in Cuenca. There's a ton of different variety of foods and cuisines. There was Japanese, there was Italian, there was Indian, there was Arabic, all sorts. And a ton of American food. And so with an expat community and also like an international community visiting constantly, they cater to all those sorts of nationalities. I would say that going out is about $5 to $8 per meal, which is very inexpensive compared to what we were paying in the United States, especially in Seattle, where it's like $20 a meal with like a drink included and stuff. Where I feel like if you went out with $20, you could get 2 meals, dessert, a drink, and a full course and appetizer, which is crazy.
And then the vegetarian options were awesome. I mean, for me as a vegetarian, I didn't find it difficult at all. I would say vegan would have been a little bit more difficult, but you can definitely find it. And one thing to note is to use TripAdvisor. They do filters where you can say vegetarian friendly or vegan friendly to find the best restaurants for your need.
We also cooked a bunch. And so the first time we went cooking, we went to Supermaxi, which was the large supermarket. It reminded me kind of like a Whole Foods or Safeway or, a very big supermarket. And they had basically everything that you'd find in the United States, and which was also a little bit why it was a little bit more expensive. So what we also went to was the local supermarket, como...
The one that we went to is Mercado 10 de Agosto, but I believe there are 3 big local markets in Cuenca, and we would recommend that because they have the freshest produce and it's awesome, and you can get everything
all the
very
vendors
very
are
inexpensive.
from Ecuador too.
So you're supporting the local foods,
and they're all organic and super cool, and it's an experience in itself. Highly recommend.
There are a ton of things to do in Cuenca, whether you want to go shopping or go to the movie theater or restaurants, bars, all that jazz. Cuenca has it, so no need to worry about that.
There's a ton of options for the digital nomad community. There's the expat community, which is very thriving. They have Facebook groups, they have events. A lot of stuff would pop up on my Facebook or Instagram feed about different events that were going on. They had a Halloween party, etc. But there's also the digital nomad community, which is the little bit of younger folks typically, and that's mostly through the Salina community. We haven't really found other places for that. And they have events pretty much every week. All sorts of things come from things like fashion to the tech community, etc. And so if we had more time, I definitely want to get more involved in the tech community. Unfortunately, this time around, we did get too involved with the digital nomad community. We're getting eased into the digital nomad lifestyle and working most of the time during the week, especially in our apartment. And then every weekend we'd have an activity, so we didn't get as involved as we'd like to.
So one of the things that was super important to me as a female was just safety of the city and going to Ecuador, South America, traveling, etc. I would say I felt very safe in Cuenca, especially in El Centro on the busier streets. It's a very safe city.
And friendly.
Yeah, super friendly. As you start to veer out more, it definitely feels it's not unsafe, you feel a little bit more on edge. So I would recommend taking taxis if you have to go further out of the city, but in the city it's definitely safe. I felt safe, Chris felt safe, I felt safe with Chris.
What about COVID safety?
It was very safe for us. It was about a 90% vaccination rate in Cuenca
itself,
specifically.
Yeah. About 60-something% in all of Ecuador.
And I don't believe there are any new hospitalizations from COVID at all while we were there. and everyone was wearing masks. Every time you walk into a restaurant, they sanitize you, check your temperature. So there are a lot of precautions going on. I felt very safe there, probably safer than most places in the US right now that are dealing with COVID, so definitely not worried on that front.
We'll talk briefly about transportation. We mostly took taxis when we were there. They have this app called Cuenca Taxi, and there's a couple other apps for like Azul Taxi as well. You have to have a local phone number to download the application and be able to call a taxi, but it basically works like Uber. Typically, when you do take a taxi, before you get in, either ask them how much it would take to get to a certain spot, or ask them to ensure that they use the meter, or else you risk getting ripped off on the price of the taxi, which happened to us a couple times. So just be very straightforward with where you're going and if they're going to use a meter or pre-approved price. Another option for transportation, especially if you're going a longer distance, is bus, and there's also you could rent a shuttle, which is a very small bus of some sort, or a van, where you can rent a shuttle, which is a little bit safer, a little bit more secluded than a bus, and doesn't make as many stops and will go directly to the location that you want to go in. Typically, I'd want to go with a bigger group of people if I was going to rent a smaller bus.
And then there's also the Tranvia, which is a new electric train that goes through the city of Cuenca, and we took it. It's super clean, really easy to use, and it was $1, I think, each way. Yeah. Overall, we would definitely recommend Cuenca. It holds a special place in our heart, specifically the charm, I think, of the city. That has the cobblestone streets, the people are super friendly, beautiful architecture, and overall just a great experience and cultural experience for us.
Now we're briefly going to chat about cultural differences from what it was like for us as Americans going to Cuenca, Ecuador, and seeing those kind of differences that we weren't used to. The first one that comes to mind for me is tipping. Something that I'm used to tipping is 20% or 15%, depending where you go in the United States. Here in Cuenca, it's not that normal. Maybe you tip 5%, and oftentimes people don't tip at all.
And then on top of that, when you go to a restaurant, you are expected usually to seat yourself. We found on the first day we were waiting for a while, and then people just kept on going in front of us. And so we learned very quickly that once you get to a restaurant, you just go seat yourself, and then they'll come by with the menu and everything.
After you're done eating, instead of waiting for the waiter to come back to you with the table, with the bill, or asking them for the bill, you can ask them for the bill and they'll bring the bill to you. But typically you just go to the front of the restaurant, let them know that you're finished, and they don't want to rush you, and so they'll let you sit there as long as you want. But go up to the front and finish and pay up there. Another cultural difference that comes to mind is that they use the bidet, or at least our apartment had a bidet. Especially in Old Town Cuenca, or El Centro, they have older pipes which can't handle toilet paper, and so you have to throw most of the toilet paper, or all the toilet paper that you use, into the trash can, and not into the toilet, because the pipes can't handle it. And then otherwise you use a bidet, which is something that I say is like very European but also South American, and clean yourself that way.
Another difference that I found is the amount of honking on the street. So typically they will just honk for, like, if they see a friend, they'll honk. Or, for example, we did one private tour and I was asking him about it, and he said he honks for the other tour guides that he sees driving past. He will also honk if there's a really large bus that kind of veered to the right to let everyone pass. He'll honk and say, as if he's saying thank you, and that just is different for us because usually honking is definitely a bad thing in the US, so
there's always a ton of honking.
Yeah, tons of honking. Oh. This isn't necessarily a cultural difference, but it's a one thing to know. I think everyone knows the Panama hat, the straw hat is just really famous, and everyone thinks it's from Panama. It's not. It's actually originated in Ecuador. So, fun fact.
As always, thank you for watching. I would say, being a digital nomad, working full-time, traveling on the weekends, and producing videos or working on videos is very stressful and difficult, but we're having a blast doing it, so we hope that you enjoy them as well. Please let us know if you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, and we're happy to get an answer to you.
Please smash that like button subscribe. It helps our channel, and follow along our adventure. We really appreciate all of you tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
And we're out.